remember when I was probably a young teenager, I went to a state park that is in Columbia, and they had what you would call a high dive. They had a diving board there in the lake, but they also had one way up above that. And at least to me as a young teenager, it looked like it was really up there. But I was challenged to go jump off the high dive, not dive off of it, but just jump off of it. So I climbed up there and I walked out to the end of the diving board and I looked down at the water, and it looked to me like it was just way, way, way down there. And I lost my nerve. I could not jump off that diving board into the water. And so I walked back to the beginning end of the diving board and I stood there and I thought, I'm up here. I've been challenged to do this, and I don't want to have to climb back down that ladder. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start running. And when I get to the end of that diving board, it'll be too late to stop. And that's what I did. I just took off. And I got to the end of the diving board. It was too late, and off I went, and into the water I went. And I'm glad that I did, and it was an exciting time. I just had to be able to say, go, and get it done. Well, my name is Richard Coleman, and I'm the pastor at Shepherd Church of the Nazarene in Lexington, South Carolina, and it's great to spend just a few moments with you today. I really enjoy the Old Testament. I've been studying about Joseph and where his brothers had sold him into slavery, and then whenever he was working as a slave in someone's house, the man's wife falsely accused him. He was thrown into prison. When he was thrown into prison, he had an opportunity to interpret some dreams with God's help. And then later, 2 years after that, one of the men remembered, and when the Pharaoh had a dream, he said, wait a minute, I know a Hebrew fella that might be able to interpret that for you. So Joseph went from being a prisoner to being second in command in Egypt. And all through that process, and you've probably heard me say it before, I just admire Joseph's attitude, where he kept a positive attitude no matter where he was, and God blessed him through all of that. Well, once Joseph was put in charge, he had told Pharaoh that they were going to have 7 years of famine, and then after that 7 years of plenty, and after that 7 years of famine. And so his job was to collect grain and different types of things during the 7 good years, so that during the 7 bad years they would be able to have that for their people, and that's what they did. So now I'd like to take you back, if I can, to Joseph's homeland, where he came from. Those 10 brothers that sold him into slavery, and also their dad that is there. We read in Genesis chapter 42, it says that while they were in Canaan, Jacob, the dad of these 10 men, he looked at them and he said, look, he said, we're in the middle of a famine. He said, things are bad. He said, and we've been sitting around talking about this and trying to figure out what to do. He said, we've talked enough. He said, something's got to be done. He said, I hear that there is grain in Egypt. So I need you fellas to go and get this grain so we won't starve to death. Well, when I think about that part of the story, it brings me to the New Testament. I think sometimes whenever we think of Jesus' words, where Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And so we ask ourselves, what is Jesus talking about? Well, first off, Jesus had said previously, he said, I did not come to destroy the commandments. He said, I came to fulfill them. In other words, what Jesus is saying was the 10 commandments, he didn't come to do away with those. They are still in play. They are still an important part of a Christian's life. But in addition to that, Jesus took a lot of time talking about the things that were important for people in their lives and how they needed to live. And so I feel that That's what Jesus was talking about. He had just talked about this, all of these things that would make our lives better as Christians. I feel like those were the things that Jesus was saying was important for us to do. And if we truly loved him, then we need to go. Just like Jacob told his sons, we need to do these things. We need to step up. We've talked about it enough. Let's start living the kind of life that God wants us to live. And so I made a short list there in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. I just briefly went through that and looked at some of those things that Jesus was talking about, and I paraphrased them in my language and made a list of those. One is, he said that we need to have honest dealings with people. To be a Christian, we ought not try to pull the wool over anyone's eyes or tell them something that's only a half-truth. We need to have honest dealings. He goes on to say that we need to keep our word. Whenever we tell somebody that we're going to do it, we need to do it. He even said we don't as Christians, we don't need to swear. There's no reason to swear, because with a Christian, your yes is your yes and your no is your no. That's all you should need from a Christian. A good solid handshake is just as good as a written contract. Jesus is saying these are the things that we need to do. He also said that we need to show mercy. You know, I was telling someone the other day that I hear people all the time saying, I want justice. And I can just tell you, I do not want God to give me justice. No way at all. I want God to show me mercy. And that's one of the things that Jesus was saying, because God has done that for us. We need to do that for others. And then he goes on to say that we should be kind to strangers and kind to our enemies. People that don't like us, people that mean us harm, we can still be kind to them, even though they're not kind back to us. He tells us that whenever we can, when we have the ability, that we need to help people. We may not have the finances to be able to give someone money, but maybe we can give them a helping hand. Maybe we can give them a word of encouragement. But he said we should always be looking for ways to help people. And then he goes on to say, don't worry about the things that you have no control over. I mean, why should I fret about this time of year when it's technically hurricane season? Why should I be fretting about a tropical storm that might be out in the Atlantic somewhere that might be heading this way or might not? I mean, I can be prepared, but he's saying don't worry about things that you have no control over. And he goes on to say how important it is for us to talk to God, to pray. And also, I was in a class the other day, and one thing in that class that the person was saying was, however long we spend in prayer, speaking to God, we should spend that long listening to God. It shouldn't be just about what we want, but we should be able to say, not my will, but yours be done. And give God an opportunity in the quiet time for him to be able to speak to us. And then that famous saying that Jesus had, that we need to treat others the way that we would want them to treat us. Some people misinterpret that and say, I need to do unto others before they do unto me. But that's not what Jesus said. He said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In other words, treat them the way you want to be treated. And then he goes on, he says, choose your path very carefully. Just because a multitude of people might be going in one direction, that might not be the right thing to do. He said, be very careful about the crowd that you follow and the path that you choose. And then finally, he said, everyone that says, Lord, Lord, will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. And so it reminds us that just because we come from a Christian family, or just because we go to a particular church, or just because we show up for church every Sunday, it does not mean that we're making it to heaven. And so Jesus is saying, look at all of these things and understand the importance of loving God with all of who we are and putting him first in everything that we do and loving others. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. May you truly be able to live for God the way He wants us to this week. Thanks for taking the time and viewing today.